independent variable, because without a planet, you don't have any economic/social system whatsoever. And why is this important? Because the whole world's at stake. As a dear friend who's both a doctor and an environmentalist always says, correct diagnosis is the first step toward proper treatment. Excuse me. If I'm going to talk about civilization, I should probably define it. Civilization is not the same as culture. All humans, and undoubtedly a lot of non-humans, have culture. Culture includes language, stories, ways of knowing, ways of relating, and so on. Civilizations are a specific subset of cultures characterized by the rise of cities. This is defensible both historically, as the rise of civilization is measured by the rise of the first city-states, and linguistically, as the root civilization comes from the root kibitatos, meaning state or city. That's fine, Derrick. What's a city? A city I've defined as a group of people living more or less permanently in one place in densities high enough to require the routine importation of food and other necessities. Two things happen as soon as you require the routine importation of necessities. First, your way of life can never be sustainable. Requiring the importation of a certain resource means you've denuded the landscape of that particular resource. I know we've been taught that evolution is based on survival of the fittest, which has so often been interpreted for us as survival of the most exploitative, the one who takes the most. But what I know is that those species who have survived in the long run have survived in the long run. And you don't survive in the long run by hyper-exploiting your surroundings. You don't survive in the long run by harming your habitat. You survive in the long run by improving your habitat. The important thing is the survival of the fit between you and your habitat. The important question, do you make your habitat better by your life and your death? How do you think the world got to be so wild and fecund and full of life in the first place? By individuals and communities making their habitat more and more healthy by their lives and their deaths. Salmon improve the health of the forest by their lives and their deaths. Beavers improve the health of forests and streams by their lives and deaths. Prairie dogs and buffalo improve the health of the prairies by their lives and deaths. Why is that so easy to see among non-humans? When it comes to humans, we fail to see the necessity of making land bases healthier by our lives and deaths, by our very existence. But that's how life works. And if you're importing resources, your way of life can never be sustainable, because you're taking more from the land base than you're returning. You're harming the land. Second, cities require force, because requiring the importation of resource means trade will never be sufficiently reliable. If the people in the next watershed over won't trade you for it, you'll take it. The problem is functional. It doesn't matter what peaceful attitudes, like she already said, people within your group hold. If your economy needs oil, you're going to take it. And the good news, from the perspective of those at the center of empire, is that if you've destroyed your land base to convert it to weapons of war, and you've converted your land into raising food only for humans, and thus raised your population beyond carrying capacity, you have a competitive advantage over your neighbors who have not. Nobody willingly gives up their land, their water, their trees, but since the city is used on its own, has to go out and get those from somewhere else, as we already heard. So where does this leave us? On land being killed. The next question, what are we going to do about it? And we have to do something, because if there's anyone left alive 100 years from now, they're going to wonder what was wrong with us, so we didn't fight like hell when the world was going down. Those that come after will only care about whether they can breathe the air, drink the water, whether there are fish in the rivers, and whether the land will feed them. But maybe before we ask what we're going to do, we need to talk about why we don't do it. More than 60 years ago, the great philosopher of technology, Lewis Mumford, asked why we do not effectively resist. And his answer rings true with each passing day. It has to do with what he called a magnificent bribe, in which, quote, each member of the community may claim every material advantage, every intellectual and emotional stimulus he may desire, in quantities hardly available hitherto, even for a restricted minority: food, housing, swift transportation, instantaneous communication, medical care, entertainment, education. So when we were in Budapest a couple days ago, I gave a talk literally in a palace. And we have more luxuries than the person who built the palace, by far. And we each have the equivalent in energy usage of 2,000 slaves available to us. And this is a One-time blowout, and this is one of the reasons we don't resist, is if we were actually to choose salmon over the dams, we would lose access to ESPN. It's interesting. I checked the ESPN website last night, and in London, it brings soccer up on the front page. At home, it brings up basketball. It's just...
Also, there's football over here, Derrick.
Oh, yeah. Barbarians. Anyway, but on one condition, one must not merely ask for nothing that the system doesn't provide, but likewise agree to take everything offered, duly processed and fabricated, homogenized and equalized, in the precise quantities that the system, rather than the person, requires. Once one opts for the system, no further choice remains. In a word, if one surrenders one's life at source, society will give back as much as can be mechanically graded, quantitatively multiplied, collectively manipulated and magnified. Once this bribe is accepted, and with the aid of new forms of mass control, its panoply of tranquilizers, incentives, and aphrodisiacs, could democracy in any form survive? That question is absurd. Life itself will not survive. This is Louis Mumford 60 years ago.
Right.
Obviously things are a lot worse now. So most talks on social ecological problems in one or more of four ways, each of which has its own problems. The first is by suggesting the solution is to simply limit one's personal participation in the destructive system, either by reducing one's consumption or walking away. I'm not a fan of this approach, primarily since it does nothing to stop the hoarders. One can feel better about oneself for having reduced one's participation, and there are cases where for moral reasons one shouldn't participate. I don't, for example, visit zoos or use pornography. But those actions don't create social change. Me not going to zoos or using porn won't shut down those industries. There are no personal solutions to social problems. Another standard end is to suggest a form of acceptance or accommodation of the horror of it all, so we can maintain inner peace as the world crumbles around us. I've seen books that present the murder of the planet as an opportunity for spiritual growth. That repulses me. Any spiritual growth that doesn't lead us to fight for life on this planet is not spiritual growth. It's another excuse for inaction, once again using nature as a resource, in this case a spiritual resource. Again, there are no personal solutions to social problems. A third option is to provide a checklist of actions, things like call a representative, vote, donate to, or volunteer at this or that organization. My response to this one's complicated. My work is about sparking a resistance movement to stop this culture from killing the planet. And that resistance movement doesn't happen on its own. We need to work to bring it into being. So yeah, I want for people to act. My concern is twofold. The first is that the suggestions are always incommensurate with the threats. A great example is Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. For 90 minutes he discussed and understated the dangers of global warming. Then his solutions: inflate your tires, change your light bulbs. Nothing about questioning corporate power, of course. Nothing about questioning growth economy. Nothing about power at all. Nothing about removing critical infrastructure. Nothing about protecting wild nature. I want for my suggestions to be more meaningful than consumer and personal choices. And I always hesitate to make suggestions to people I don't know. How do I know what another person's strengths are or weaknesses? How do I know what that person loves to do? When people I don't know ask what they should do to protect the earth, I always respond by asking them a series of questions. First, what do you love? Whatever it is, it's under assault. Defend it. Everyone loves some place or some creature. Everyone has some atrocity they yearn, burn, to end. So do it. The good thing about everything being so messed up is that no matter where you look, there's good work to be done. I love the fact that this audience laughed at that. The next is, what are your gifts and how can you use them to service the land? We all have different gifts. I can write books. I can't write good press releases. I can't do accounting. Small organizations are starved for accountants or people who can work with computers. I can barely do email. Some people have gifts for organizing. I don't. You should see my fucking pens. I can't even organize them. So find out what are your gifts and then use them. What are the largest, most pressing problems you can help to solve using the gifts that are unique to you and all the universe? One reason I write my books is that no one else is doing it. I know people doing great work saving pangolins, saving prairie dogs, saving beavers, wolves, buffalo, migratory songbirds, protecting land, restoring habitat, simply because no one else is doing it. Find what you love and fight like hell. using every gift you've got to defend your beloved. The fourth typical ending I've seen in talks or books on social or ecological problems, and I have to admit I'm guilty of all of these, including with this talk, consists of having spent the talk describing the horrors we face, then expressing with as much optimism and sincerity as one can muster, the vague hope that somehow good will triumph over evil, and that somehow this culture won't kill the planet. Note the passive voice. But given that every biological indicator is going in the wrong direction, given that this culture has been able to pollute every part of the planet, given that it violates even the deepest folds of the oceans, given that human supremacy is not only not going away, but is in ascendancy, not only is a vague hope insufficient, especially given what's at stake, but I see no evidence it's warranted. Just last week, I read that they have found microplastics in human ovarian follicles. Anyway, when I think of environmentalism, I picture a body wheeled into an emergency room, bleeding from 1,000 cuts. Doctors and nurses work feverishly to stop the bleeding, to give infusions. They do everything but the most important thing of all. They don't stop the madman continuing to stab the patient. All that said, I have one thing I'd like for you to do right now and every day. I'm begging you to transfer your loyalty away from the dominant economics and social system and to wild nature. Two examples may help make clear the merest beginnings of what I'm getting at. One is that a few years ago, Georges Monbiot expressed the moment he realized small-scale wind and solar won't effectively power a large-scale economy, which is true, and realized he needed to support nuclear energy, which is absurd. He asked, quote, how do we drive our textile mills, brick kilns, blast furnaces, and electric railways, not to mention advanced industrial processes, end quote. Let's change just a few words and see how it sounds. How do the industrialists drive their textile mills, their brick kilns, blast furnaces, and electrical railways, not to mention their advanced industrial processes? They're not mine, they're not ours, and we don't need to power them. The earth especially doesn't need them. The last thing the earth needs is another blast furnace. The next way to make this clear is, if space aliens were coming down from outer space and doing to this planet what industrial civilization is doing to it, bathing the world in endocrine disruptors, changing the climate, cutting down forests, wiping out biodiversity, vacuuming the oceans, bringing vertebrate evolution to an end, putting microplastics and flame retardant in every mother's breast milk, I think we would all know exactly what needs to be done, and we would do it. If you change your loyalty away from this economic and social system and to wild nature, everything changes. What you do next becomes merely a matter of strategy and tactics, not one of divided loyalty as you fight to protect the beings you love, while you try to maintain a system that has been destroying the earth from the beginning. My friend, the doctor and environmentalist John Osborne, says the reason he protects wild nature is that, quote, as things become increasingly chaotic, I want to make sure some evolutionary doors remain open. If bull trout are around in 10 years, they may be around in 1,000. But if they're gone in 10 years, they're gone forever. If a patch of old-growth forest is standing in 10 years, it may be standing in 1,000. If it's gone in 10 years, it is, in human terms, gone forever. We need to say and mean extinction, not on my watch. To take us back to the beginning, we are like my friends and comrades when I was a baby activist, holding on by our fingernails, protecting this or that creature, this or that piece of land until civilization collapses and life can return. But we're doing it in public, asking others of the same to join us. Last night we were down at